Hi, this is Perth Tolle at Life and Liberty Indexes, and today I'm joined by Will Hershey at Roundhill Investments. We had a conversation, and Will and I talk quite often, and we had a conversation recently about a top holding that is in both of our funds, and we found it interesting that both our funds with very different strategies ended up with the same holding. So we thought we'd make a video about it today and see what happened there.
Yeah, and I just want to say, Perth, we're such good friends. We talk all the time, and I realize that even though that's the case, I really don't know that much about your index. And I said, why don't we get together and do this and learn a little bit about each other's product? Clearly, we have the one holding that brought us together,
Right.
but let's have some fun.
Yeah. So the holding is CD Projekt Red, and I'm probably pronouncing that wrong. And you're the gamer, so tell me if
No, you got it. You nailed it.
Is that right?
You nailed
Okay.
it.
This is a Polish gaming company, right? They make video games. They create their own games, which tell me why you go first. Why is that in your fund, which is kind of obvious. You have a gaming index.
The index is the Roundhill BITKRAFT Esports Index.
Yeah.
And CD Projekt, as you mentioned, Polish game developer, working on right now what is probably one of the most anticipated video games of all time, Cyberpunk 2077. But for us, really with our focus being on esports and game streaming, they have a popular game in their portfolio called Gwent, which is played competitively for tournaments. And that's really kind of what our focus is in terms of the way our index is constructed. Mm-hmm. They also, a lot of people may or may not know this, but the popular Netflix show The Witcher was first a book, then became a game series that CD Projekt put out. And that's seen over the past year, that's really been what's driving partially the company as it leads up to this new release. But it's a very interesting company. Also really interesting to me that it's in your index. I mean, I guess let's start at a higher level just so I understand. Clearly, if it's in there, I'm making the assumption that Poland meets your criteria, which for those who aren't familiar is really focused on freedom weighting as it relates to emerging markets. But
Right.
How does that process work? How does Poland, and then in particular CD Projekt, make it into an index like yours?
Yeah, that's a great question. This actually makes a really good case study because Poland is one of those countries that was the shining star for freedom, kind of especially economic freedom, out of the post-Soviet bloc. So in the past few decades, they've really made a lot of strides on economic freedom, been the leader in their region. And in 2008, they're the only country in the region that did not go into recession. So they've enjoyed a lot of high economic freedom, but in the recent past, they've kind of backslid a little bit on the freedom levels. So, a few years ago, Kaczynski came into power, the PIS government. They are a far right-wing type of government and very nationalistic. And so they've been kind of cracking down on judicial independence and other type of things. They have constitutional majority. And so some of the freedoms have been eroding a little bit. And so they, in 2017, were the top holding in our index. They were number one most free emerging market. And they were also the top performer that year, which was great, out of the emerging markets. But then in 2018, they fell to fourth place. So, and they remained there since. So they right now are the fourth largest holding instead of the top holding. And we use only quantitative metrics. So we use only scores given to us by our think tank partners, the Cato Institute, the Fraser Institute, and the Friedrich Naumann Foundation in Germany. So, I only use their scores. I don't look at, hey, what's in the news about Poland today? Because there's a lot of news going on all the time, but we don't look at that. We just look at the score. So we keep it completely objective. And Poland is still one of the freer markets, despite their kind of backtracking lately.
You read my mind because when you were saying all of that, I was like, this sounds qualitative, but it's backed by third-party data that's ultimately dictating what weighting on a country level.
Yeah,
right?
So the freedom weights are on the country level only, and the countries are 100% freedom weighted. So that means the higher freedom countries get a higher weight, the lower freedom countries get a lower weight, and the worst actors as far as human freedom and economic freedom, like China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey, are actually excluded altogether. So that makes us very different from the other broad emerging markets funds out there in that we don't have any China, whereas most of the others have about 40% now in China.
Could you really call it, if I'm simplifying things, is it ESG meets emerging markets? Is that like,
it is,
I don't know if you want to be labeled ESG because there's all different
because
ways of looking at
ESG
that.
implies the security level metrics of E, S, and G, right? So it's, and we don't use those security level metrics. This is country level. So it's kind of like a country level ESG.
But then for us, and just to give people a background on how we do it, really we're incorporating primarily kind of more quantitative analysis as well, where we're actually screening public filings for all companies in our universe for keywords related to our theme. Because as a lot of people who understand that have invested in thematic products, just because, let's use the example of Amazon, which owns Twitch, the largest game streaming platform in the world. Is Amazon, as a result of its investment in Twitch, an esports and gaming company? I think we'd all agree no. So really the methodology we've come up with is based on screening, annual reports, 10Ks, presentations for keywords related to our theme. So keywords like esports, game streaming, digital entertainment, and that really, combined with a couple other factors, gets a company like CD Projekt into the portfolio. But for you, okay, so Poland,
you look at companies all over the world then for that.
Correct.
So you screen so it's global.
Correct, and maybe some from countries that you wouldn't be too happy with, but we'll save that for another day. Ultimately,
I know about your 10-cent holding.
China is number one or number two with the U.S. in terms of gaming revenues in the world. So we would be remiss not to have it from that perspective, putting aside any kind of political discussion. Right. But so you mentioned Poland is the fourth highest rated country. But then how does CD Projekt become representative of that country?
Yeah. So we look at within the country weights. Once we have those, we look within the countries and include the 10 largest, most liquid holdings that are not state-owned enterprises. And in Poland, once you kick out the state-owned enterprises, so if you just look at the 10 largest holdings that meet our liquidity requirements, 7 of them are state-owned enterprises. So 7 companies get kicked out, and we start over. And this company, CD Projekt, is the largest gaming company in Poland. So they're in there because they're not state-owned and they are a very large company and meets our liquidity requirements in Poland.
They're a very large company, which I think is partially why we connected, because if you look at the chart of CD Projekt over the past 10 years, if you pull it up, if you have it on Bloomberg, you can probably Google it too.
Yeah.
It makes Amazon and Netflix look like treasuries with how well it's performed, which is crazy. And so much.
They do have, that product coming out soon.
It was supposed to come out in April. It got kicked back even before all of coronavirus. And they're saying that it's still scheduled for September, which, I mean, if you're releasing a blockbuster game into this environment where everyone's, cooped up at home looking for that next form of entertainment, they've watched their entire Netflix library 2 times over, you kind of can't ask for a better environment for the game to be released.
What's the name of the new game again?
Cyberpunk 2077. To me, I look at what they're doing right now with this game. It's almost like where Take-Two was, which is the company behind Grand Theft Auto, before Grand Theft Auto 3 came out. It was such a revolutionary game in terms of what it did, and if they can get it right, the plan is then for them to build on top of it. And really, the way games are really built now is they're kind of more games as a service and building around franchise intellectual property that can then be developed upon again and again. So this could be really big for them. I think the expectations are super high, but everyone's looking forward to it.
I think it's a great environment to be releasing a game. I mean, you can't really ask for a more captive audience right now.
The data is crazy. Like in terms of gaming engagement, Verizon earlier this year reported 75% increase in terms of gaming network usage. Wow. Steam, which is a PC gaming platform, all-time record for users. Twitch, all-time high in terms of viewers. So it's definitely a rare green shoot in terms of kind of fundamental picture that's going on. Question for you, and I'm switching gears away from CD Projekt. What's the number 1 rated country from freedom standpoint?
Taiwan. So it's Taiwan, South Korea, Chile, and then Poland. So Taiwan and South Korea actually have, speak of the crisis, come out as examples for the world in the way that they handled the coronavirus crisis. And happy to see that they're finally getting some recognition, because they've, for a long time, been a shining beacon of freedom in that region, in the China region. And they have cannons pointed at them every day from China, and they learn to deal with this. They actually have they have drills where they deal with what happens if we're being invaded. So this is just a normal thing for the Taiwanese people, and it's a perfect example of Washington Post the other day called them the Free China. And of course, people were like, "Come on, say the name, say the name." So then they changed the title to, and they said Taiwan. But I think the Free China is actually a good description, because people always say, "Oh, well, Chinese people don't want democracy; they don't want to be free or whatever." But then you look at Taiwan, and you're like, "Well, it's a perfect example that Chinese people can be free, and they do want to be free." So Taiwan actually, I'm glad is getting some recognition in all of this.
And you mentioned Korea, Taiwan, which we hold names in both those countries. I know that we don't hedge out currency. So we're going in, buying the local name listed on those exchanges and taking on whatever the combined currency risk, quote unquote, looks like. Do you guys do the same?
Yeah, we don't hedge currency either. So, it's hard to predict where the currencies are going to go. And we just didn't want to make that call. So this is something that the only thing that we do is freedom weighting. And that's the main innovation. We don't put any kind of tilt on it. We don't put a currency hedge on it. We don't go value or growth or size or anything like that in there. It's just isolating the freedom factor. And if somebody, because the feedback that we got in the beginning before we launched the product is, because initially I had some value factors on there, and then people said, no, if we wanted to value emerging markets, we can get that. We don't need that. Your main innovation is freedom, so just isolate that one. So that's what we did.
Yeah, no, that's what I believe in terms of creating a product, right? Create a pure play vehicle. For us, it's esports. For you, it's freedom factor that actually gives people tools to reflect that in their portfolio. Long, short, by puts, by calls on it, whatever you want to do. Although we hope you're going long, and have that as kind of a tool in your tool set. Do you think that do you think that there are certain countries that will is there a lot of movement in terms of that rating? Could it change a lot?
Sometimes.
Over the next 5-10 years?
So we do, sometimes it moves fast, but sometimes it moves slow. So usually when you see a decline, it declines quickly. Like Poland went from 1 to 4. But also we used to have Turkey in the index. And Turkey, their freedom declined so quickly in 2017 that they triggered one of our rules in the methodology that's a freedom decline momentum rule, that if a country declines too quickly in 1 year based on a scale that we use, then that country gets kicked out even if it was already in the index. So yeah.
In between rebalances?
Yeah, during rebalance. Only during rebalance, not in between.
During rebalance.
We rebalance once a year because the data comes out once a year, and we're purely dependent on the data. So no subjectivity. So it's a once a year rebalance.
Got it.
Yeah.
This is interesting. At the highest for our rebalance, we rebalance once a quarter, which I think in such a fast growing and evolving sector, it's really important to kind of get the companies that are most reflective of the theme. And we actually even have something additional in there, which is when new IPOs come out, if they, based on our screening for keywords, has a really, really high score, and by that they're defined as a pure play based on our methodology, we'll actually add it
that's awesome.
in between rebalances.
So you can catch IPOs too.
So we can catch IPOs not the day of, but we're adding them within the next week.
Yeah.
So we added a Chinese name, Douyu, which is a Chinese game streaming platform. We added that last year, just a week after it came to market. But that's an interesting feature we think will kind of differentiate us in such a fast-growing space.
I like the gaming space in China.
You sent me that really interesting piece, which was about the Chinese gamers will no longer be allowed to play with.
What was that game that I sent you? It was Animal.
I think it was Animal Crossing.
Yeah, Animal Crossing. Apparently, they banned Animal Crossing because Joshua Wong, who is a very well-known activist in Hong Kong, he's the student leader of the Demosisto, which is the students who are fighting for democracy, basically. It's a new political party that they formed, and he's the leader of it, and he's been jailed for his involvement in the Umbrella movement in 2014 and so forth. He wrote online that he loves playing Animal Crossing, and because he loved it, I guess Chinese authorities.
That is crazy.
Yeah, well, and also they recently just banned a lot of other gaming because it's a way for people to communicate with the outside world so that people can communicate with other gamers in other countries. And so now they can't play those games. So,
no, I mean, the regulation in China has been one of the very few things that's held the gaming industry back from even further growth. Like you saw in 2017 and 2018, there was just a huge backlog of games because China wants to control what type of content their people are consuming. It's interesting, though, because Animal Crossing is the most innocent game you could ever come up with.
That's what you told me.
Of the
like, it's a kid's game, right?
It's a mean, a lot of adults are playing it now, but it's just very innocent and there's no blood, there's no gore, there's no sex, most
but apparently you can like create your own sets and your own clothes and stuff like that. So these people were choosing sets that were representing the freedom movement, and so I think that's the problem with it.
That is one thing. Games are a form of personal expression too, which potentially adds. Yeah, no, that's the best part is you have agency, you have control.
Yeah.
I think like learning about your methodology, it just like intuitively makes a lot of sense to me that over the long run, if you're operating in a country where like there are these freedoms that exist, like I don't want to call it like a play on capitalism, but in a way it kind of maybe is, even if that's not necessarily. Yeah.
It's like ESG for capitalists.
I like that because like it's a use case for something that forget if you want to call it ESG. ESG to me has very much become a sales term. This is playing on the factors that in my mind are part of ESG that probably actually drive outperformance rather than just putting it on to put a label on something. And that just like makes sense to me.
In the long run, we do hope that outperformance shows, because if you look at history, the freer markets do outperform in the long run. But I mean, they're more dynamic, they're more innovative, more flexible to market trends, have more sustainable growth rather than debt-driven growth, and they use their capital and labor more efficiently. So they have less capital flight and capital destruction. But in the short term, you could underperform. So right now, we're underperforming year to date the broad emerging markets because China has not been as affected in the stock markets, even though they're the most affected country by the coronavirus. They've had a lot of stock market intervention. They, banned institutional selling for a while. We don't know when that ended or if it ended. There's a Bloomberg article about that I can link to this video. But because of some of those interventions, which aren't sustainable for the long run, obviously, but because of that, it does show some short-term outperformance.
Well, you get the benefit of not having the countries where there's potential manipulation, but sometimes that goes against you, I guess. The moral of the story, which should be a net good thing.
The countries that have let the news cycle through in a transparent manner with less interference, I mean, all the governments are interfering their markets to some degree now. But the countries...
Hello, look at us.
Right. So the countries that are doing it less, like South Korea and Taiwan in that region, are also the ones that are set to benefit from the supply chain disruption that's coming inevitably from this crisis.
And just while we're talking on performance, because I'd be remiss not to mention it, obviously we talked about the fundamentals for gaming are very strong.
Yeah.
We haven't, I think we'll start to see that show when Q1 numbers come out, and then hopefully, but not hopefully in Q2, because hopefully we're starting to return to some semblance of normal life globally by then. But I do still think the momentum is there, and you're getting new people playing games that hadn't before. I mean, just for myself, I was about to say 30, but I turned 31 in quarantine last week.
Happy birthday!
Thank you.
That sucks to have your birthday in quarantine.
Yeah, tell me about it.
Okay.
But a lot of my friends who are in their 30s are now turning to gaming, and these are not gamers.
Yeah.
I think that's just an anecdotal trend.
I'm about to turn to gaming myself. My daughter's a gamer. She's playing. She's plays on Roblox with her friends. So, yeah.
Roblox just had a fancy valuation, but
what a great company! It's like endless games, and there's like not just one game. There's like lots of games inside the game, and people keep creating new ones.
Oh, that's kind of awesome. What a lot of people refer to as like almost like a view of a quote unquote metaverse, right? These games ultimately become platforms for people to build things on top of within a virtual world. And that's really kind of like the long-term crazy bull thesis for games as really just being a medium for this new version of a third place. And you look at, for example, Fortnite. Fortnite is now for a lot of kids what they turn to after school when they get home to communicate with one another. It's not even necessarily about, for me, that was AOL Instant Messenger. I'm showing my age a little bit. But for them, it's almost more about that social interaction and using the game as a platform in that use case for as a means of communication rather than trying to win. And I think that's like where we get really excited. But this has borne out in our index. So our index is only down, might even be flat after today, year to date, amidst what's been pretty crazy. Gaming is it's already a massive industry. It's $150 billion globally, but it's really a long-term trend. It's a secular trend.
I don't know if you heard, but
innovative.
You know how Motif is shutting down? You know what their top performing theme was?
Gaming.
That's right.
There are a handful of other competing gaming-related funds out there. I think the two main things that differentiate ours is one, this focus on esports, on social gaming, on watching other people play. That's really where I see the most amount of growth and kind of future long-term potential. And then two, which I think is really unique and will be our approach as we continue to roll out thematic indices, is really our weighting methodology. Not going market cap weighted, not going even equal weighted, but really trying to, via a weighting methodology that rewards companies that are more exposed to our given theme, trying to really isolate.
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
Trying to really isolate the beta, and once again, giving people the tools to express what they're trying to express. I mean, just going to point out one example. One of our competitors, the two largest weightings are in semiconductors. It's theme weighting. If we did another theme, we'd want the companies, provided that they're liquid and large enough, right? We need to build a scalable product as well, but really trying to give you that exposure.
See, I think that's really innovative because of thematics, and a lot of them are market cap weighted or equal weighted because that's just the way it's always been done.
Yep. Then you tend to end up with the same top holdings amongst themes, theme ETFs that shouldn't really be the case.
No, that's awesome.
So we do it with tiered buckets. So we have pure plays, cores, and non-cores, and then pure plays get 1.5 times the weight of cores and 1.5 times the weight of non-cores, and that's kind of, so it's like a tiered weight because there's no perfect science around ascribing, how exposed a company is to the theme. We try and get there through our keyword screening, but it's not perfect. So that's kind of the solution.
That's awesome. I love that. I didn't know that about it. Very well designed. Who came up with the methodology design?
Yours truly.
Okay. Nice work.
Thank you. I love yours too.
Thanks.
I've built a lot of indexes over the years in previous roles. First two ETFs I was involved in were 2012, 2013, then helped launch an ETN, also launched a suite. So I had a lot of experience building indexes and knew what I liked and didn't like about different ways of approaching it. So this was kind of our unique spin on it.
That's awesome. Very nice. Okay, so I think that covers both ETFs pretty well.
Our stuff is all on our website, roundhillinvestments.com.
Okay.
What's your website?
lifeandlibertyindexes.com.
Perfect. This was fun. I honestly learned, I think you just said you did too.
Yes.
We learned a lot about each other's products, so this was fun.